Hello and welcome back to Military Mayday. We got part 2. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.
The cold arithmetic of what supply chain collapse, sustained operational condition that would be enforced until the strategic objectives that motivated it were achieved. Most people analyzing this situation stop at the military mechanics, and that is exactly why they miss what I am about to explain. The cold arithmetic of what supply chain collapse means for 120,000 human beings in active combat conditions is the part of this story that has received the least serious attention, and it is the part that most directly determines what happens next. An IDF armored brigade in active operations consumes approximately 180,000 liters of diesel fuel per day across all its organic vehicles: tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery tractors, engineering equipment, logistics trucks. Israel has approximately 8 armored brigades currently deployed in operational configurations. At that consumption rate, the fuel inventory surviving the Phase 1 and Phase 3 strikes, estimated at approximately 40% of pre-campaign levels, represented between 4 and 6 days of operational consumption. By day 5, fuel availability had fallen below the minimum threshold required to sustain offensive operations. Armored vehicles began being immobilized not by enemy action, but by empty fuel tanks. That is a fact that should be allowed to register in its full weight. Aviation fuel presents an even more acute constraint. IDF air operations consume approximately 2.4 million liters of aviation fuel daily at current sortie rates. The surviving aviation fuel inventory after the port strikes and depot destruction was assessed at approximately 8 days of consumption. By day 5, sortie rates had been reduced by over 60% as fuel conservation protocols were implemented. The F-35s that represent Israel's most capable strike platform, the aircraft that IDF operational doctrine depends on for deep strike missions, were being flown at a fraction of their operational tempo, their missions rationed against a fuel supply that was visibly counting down. Ammunition consumption in sustained combat is enormous in ways that peacetime planning consistently underestimates. An Israeli artillery battalion firing at standard sustained fire rates expends approximately 800 rounds per day. Multiply that across the artillery systems deployed across 5 active fronts. Add the consumption of tank main gun ammunition, mortar rounds, anti-tank missiles, and the precision-guided munitions that modern combat depends on, and the daily ammunition consumption figure runs to thousands of tons. The surviving forward depot inventory after Phase 3 represented approximately 5 days of consumption at reduced operational tempo. By day 5, multiple artillery units had reported exhaustion of available ammunition stocks and cessation of fire missions. Food is the variable that most directly affects the human dimension of this collapse, and it is the one most consistently underweighted in professional military analysis. Military ration supply for 120,000 personnel requires approximately 360 tons of food daily. IDF doctrine calls for forward units to carry 3 days of organic ration supply. By day 4, units in the most forward positions were consuming emergency ration reserves intended for genuine last resort situations. By day 5, operational assessments across multiple sectors included the words that no military commander wants to write: personnel combat effectiveness degraded by nutritional insufficiency. Let me say that plainly for what it means. Soldiers were hungry. Soldiers who are hungry make decisions differently than soldiers who are fed. And an army whose soldiers are making different decisions is not the army that its commanders have planned for. The medical logistics dimension adds a further layer of acute concern. Field surgical units, trauma treatment facilities, and casualty evacuation systems all depend on continuous resupply of consumable medical materials, blood products, surgical supplies, pharmaceutical inventories that have very limited organic carrying capacity. By day 3, multiple field medical facilities were operating on reduced capacity due to consumable shortages. By day 5, the medical logistics situation had become a direct constraint on operational decision-making as commanders factored casualty treatment capacity into their assessment of which operations could be sustained. Stay with me, because this next part changes everything in terms of how we understand what Washington's response actually revealed. Having been inside the American national security system, having sat in the rooms where contingency planning is done, having read the assessments, having understood the assumptions embedded in American military planning, what strikes me most about the United States' inability to execute emergency resupply is not political. It is physical. It is the collision of planning assumptions with operational reality, and the result of that collision is as revealing as anything that happened on the Israeli side. The emergency resupply planning that began in Washington within hours of the Phase 1 strikes confronted 3 sequential problems that compounded into what I can only describe as an insurmountable operational constraint. The first problem was throughput capacity. American C-17 and C-5 heavy lift aircraft can each carry approximately 70 to 80 tons of cargo per flight. Israel's military fuel requirement alone, 2.4 million liters of aviation fuel daily, translates to approximately 2,000 tons of fuel that must be delivered every day simply to maintain current reduced sortie rates. At 75 tons per C-17 sortie, that fuel requirement alone demands 27 heavy lift sorties per day before accounting for ammunition, food, medical supplies, and spare parts. The entire USAF C-17 fleet numbers approximately 220 aircraft. Not all are available for any single operation. The airlift throughput required to compensate for the loss of maritime logistics is physically beyond what available American heavy lift assets can provide. That is not a policy failure. That is mathematics. The second problem was receiving infrastructure. The Phase 4 strikes that destroyed Ben Gurion's runway systems eliminated the primary entry point for air-delivered cargo. Ramon Airport was similarly non-functional. The military airfields with adequate cargo handling capacity were destroyed in the earlier base strikes. American military engineers can repair cratered runways, but not in the time frame relevant to an acute supply crisis, and not while the repair operation itself is subject to follow-on strikes against the repair equipment and personnel. The third problem was the threat environment. American C-17s delivering emergency supplies are large, slow, radar-conspicuous aircraft that require permissive airspace to operate safely. The same Iranian air defense and strike assets that executed the supply interdiction campaign had demonstrated both the capability and the will to engage targets across the operational theater. Operating heavy lift aircraft into a non-permissive threat environment without fighter escort is not a viable option. Operating fighter escort requires the functional air bases that the campaign had already destroyed. The circular dependency is complete and resolves on no quick timeline. The Pentagon was not speechless because it lacked will. It was operationally checkmated because the Iranian campaign had been specifically designed, not accidentally arranged, to defeat the American resupply response before American resupply planning could transition from assessment to execution. That is the strategic sophistication of what Iran accomplished. It did not just attack Israel. It attacked the American guarantee that underwrites Israel's security. And it did so with sufficient precision to render that guarantee operationally meaningless without triggering the direct American military retaliation that would have escalated the conflict to an entirely different level. What I have observed in studying military collapse across decades, and I want to be careful here because this subject deserves precision rather than drama, is that armies do not break when they run out of supplies. They break when they lose the belief that the supplies will eventually come. The physical reality of empty ammunition crates and dry fuel tanks is severe but survivable if the soldiers holding those positions believe that resupply is imminent and that their sacrifice in holding until it arrives serves a purpose that justifies the cost. When that belief evaporates, when the soldier in the forward position understands that the ports are destroyed, that the roads are impassable, that the airfields are cratered, and that the Americans cannot get through, the organizational coherence that sustains military performance begins to dissolve in ways that no amount of tactical training can reverse. The contrast between the psychological condition of Iranian forces conducting this campaign and Israeli forces absorbing it reflects a fundamental asymmetry that goes deeper than any weapons comparison. Iran's operational planners executed this campaign from a position of strategic initiative. They chose the timing, selected the targets, controlled the sequencing, and maintained the operational coherence of a complex 5-phase campaign over 5 days, without the command disruption that would have compromised a less disciplined organization. Iranian military culture has been shaped by something specific and consequential. The experience of having survived, adapted, and ultimately prevailed against pressures specifically designed to break it. 50 years of sanctions, assassinations of senior commanders, sabotage of industrial facilities, and continuous military threats have not produced a demoralized institution. They have produced an institution with a deeply internalized conviction that external pressure, regardless of its severity, is a problem to be solved rather than a condition to be accepted. That conviction, expressed operationally as the willingness to execute complex, sustained, high-risk operations against heavily defended targets, is the human foundation of the military capability that has just collapsed the IDF supply chain. My assessment, and I want to state this as clearly as I can, is that what has just happened in the Middle East is not a battle that went badly for one side. It is the operational proof of a strategic transition that has been building for 2 decades and that the Western foreign policy establishment consistently refused to acknowledge, because acknowledgement would have required a fundamental revision of the assumptions on which its entire strategic architecture was built. Iran has now demonstrated at scale that it possesses the precision strike capability, the operational doctrine, and the strategic will to conduct sustained interdiction campaigns against critical infrastructure with a completeness and a speed that Western planning models had not assessed as operationally achievable.
Wow. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's part 2. Please like, subscribe, comment. Thank you for your time.